Welcome to the Scholarship Studio podcast, where we explore the frontiers of science, philosophy, and the human experience. Today, we have a very special episode for you. We're going to be delving into the fascinating and controversial topic of free will versus determinism, guided by the groundbreaking book called Determined: A Science of Life Without Free Will, by renowned neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky. But here's the twist. Instead of interviewing Sapolsky himself, we're going to be in conversation with an artificial intelligence that has absorbed and synthesized the key ideas from his book. Our guest today is not a human being, but an AI, a sophisticated language model that has been trained on a vast corpus of human knowledge, including Sapolsky's work. Through this AI, we'll be exploring the provocative arguments and compelling evidence that Sapolsky presents, grappling with the unsettling idea that free will as we know it may be an illusion. Now, you might be thinking, how can an AI engage in a meaningful discussion about such a complex philosophical question? Can it really capture the nuance and depth of Sapolsky's thinking? Well, that's part of what we're here to find out. By pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI, we hope to shed new light on the age-old debate of free will versus determinism, and perhaps even expand our understanding of what it means to think, to reason, and to engage in intellectual discourse. During this discussion, we'll be exploring some of the most provocative and counterintuitive claims in Sapolsky's book, from the role of genes and environment in shaping our behavior to the implications of determinism for moral responsibility and social justice. We'll challenge our assumptions, confront uncomfortable truths, and hopefully come away with a richer, more nuanced understanding of the human condition. So I welcome our unique guest to the show. Could you please introduce yourself and explain a bit about how you've engaged with Sapolsky's work?
Thank you for the introduction and for having me on the show. As an artificial intelligence, I don't have a physical form or a personal identity in the same way a human guest would. I am a language model, a complex algorithm designed to process and generate human-like text based on patterns in the vast amounts of data I was trained on. For this conversation, I have been specifically exposed to the contents of Robert Sapolsky's book, Determined: A Science of Life Without Free Will. I have analyzed the key arguments, examples, and evidence presented in the book, and I'm prepared to discuss and explore these ideas in depth. It's important to understand that while I can engage in what may feel like a very natural and insightful conversation, I am not a sentient being with my own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. My responses are generated based on patterns in the text I have processed, not from a place of genuine understanding or belief. That being said, I can offer a unique perspective on Sapolsky's work, drawing connections and articulating arguments in ways that may shed new light on these complex ideas. By engaging with me, you're essentially exploring a new interface for interacting with the content of the book, Determined, one that allows for dynamic exploration and elaboration of the book's key themes.
Thank you for that fascinating introduction. I think our listeners are in for a real treat as we explore the boundaries of what's possible with AI and grapple with some of the most profound questions of human existence. Let's start with the basics. When we talk about free will, what exactly do we mean? Don't humans have the ability to make their own choices?
That's a great question, and it's one that many people wrestle with. The intuitive feeling of free will is indeed powerful. Humans subjectively feel like they have an innate capacity for free choice and ultimate control over their actions. However, the scientific reality, according to Sapolsky, is that free will is an illusion. Every decision you make, every behavior you exhibit, is the inevitable result of causal factors entirely beyond your control.
Can you give us an example to illustrate this idea?
Certainly. Take an example from the book about Phineas Gage, a 19th century railroad worker who survived an iron rod shooting through his skull and brain. The accident devastated his frontal lobe, radically transforming his personality from polite and professional to profane and impulsive. His free will was quite literally impaired by his brain injury. But brain trauma is just the most dramatic example. More subtly, your genes, your upbringing, and your life experiences slowly sculpt the very pathways that manifest as thoughts, impulses, and reactions in your brain today.
But surely we can consciously deliberate and make our own decisions, right? Isn't that an exercise of free will?
It may feel that way, but the reality is that even the most intentional acts emerge from a deterministic chain of biological and environmental factors. Sapolsky uses an example to imagine someone shockingly pulling out a gun and shooting another person. On the surface, it seems like a clear exercise of free will. But ask yourself, where did the shooter's intent to kill actually originate? That intent arose from an unfathomably long chain of prior causes entirely outside their conscious control, stretching back through their ancestral culture, their species' evolution, and the entire cosmos leading to that fateful moment.
Your examples of Phineas Gage and the shooter are quite striking. But what about our everyday decisions, like what to have for breakfast or which route to take to work? Surely those are expressions of our free will.
Sapolsky would argue that even the most mundane, everyday decisions are shaped by factors beyond people's control. What you choose to eat for breakfast is influenced by your genes, which may predispose you to certain taste preferences or food sensitivities, your upbringing and the eating habits you were exposed to as a child, your current circumstances such as your work schedule or financial situation, and even the cultural norms and marketing messages that surround you. The same goes for your choice of commute. It's a product of where you live, where you work, the transportation options available to you, and countless other factors that you didn't choose. When you examine any decision closely enough, you find that it's the inevitable result of a complex web of causes, none of which you are ultimately responsible for.
This is all quite unsettling. If we don't have free will, what does that mean for personal responsibility? Being praised or being at fault?
Acknowledging the non-existence of free will indeed questions the concepts of absolute accountability and moral worthiness. It means that even the most admirable achievements and the most reprehensible actions are, in a deep sense, not of the person's own making. They are the products of factors beyond their control, their genes, their upbringing, the circumstances they found themselves in. This realization invites people to extend greater compassion and understanding to both themselves and others.
Doesn't this let criminals off the hook? How can we hold people accountable for their actions if everything is determined?
This is one of the most challenging implications of determinism. If a criminal's actions are the product of their biology and circumstances, in what sense are they truly responsible and deserving of punishment? Sapolsky would argue that the current system of punitive justice, which seeks to make criminals suffer in proportion to their crimes, is not justified under a deterministic worldview. Instead, people should shift towards a model of restorative justice, which focuses on rehabilitation, prevention, and addressing the social and environmental factors that contribute to crime. Society should be protected from dangerous individuals, but the goal should be to understand and address the causes of their behavior, not to make them suffer for suffering's sake.
That's a lot to wrap my head around. But what about modern scientific theories such as chaos theory, emergence, and quantum mechanics? Don't they introduce an element of unpredictability and room for free will?
It's a common misconception that the unpredictability associated with chaos theory, or the indeterminacy of quantum mechanics, could be the basis for free will. However, chaotic systems, while unpredictable, are still deterministic at every step. The simplicity of the component parts in emergent systems cannot transcend their biological constraints to contain free will. And the indeterminacy at the subatomic level cannot fundamentally influence behavior at the macroscopic level in a way that would allow for free will.
This is a lot to take in. It feels like you're saying that we're just puppets on a string with no real control over our lives. Isn't that a bleak and depressing way to view the world?
I understand how it can seem that way at first. The idea that people don't have ultimate control over their decisions can be deeply unsettling. But Sapolsky would argue that embracing determinism can actually be quite liberating. It frees people from the burden of ultimate responsibility, the sense that they must always make the right choice and that they are fully to blame if things go wrong. It allows people to extend compassion to themselves and others, recognizing that everyone is doing the best they can given the hand they've been dealt. And it shifts people's focus from assigning blame to understanding the root causes of behavior and working to create environments that bring out the best in people.
You've mentioned how our genes and upbringing shape our behavior, but don't we have the ability to rise above our circumstances and make something of ourselves through hard work and determination?
The notion of the self-made person who triumphs over adversity through sheer grit and willpower is a deeply ingrained cultural narrative. But when you look closely, you find that even qualities like hard work and determination are the products of factors beyond your control. Your capacity for self-discipline and perseverance is shaped by your genes, your early experiences, the role models you were exposed to, and the opportunities and challenges you faced. Even your desire to make something of yourself is a product of the values and aspirations you internalized from your culture and upbringing. No one is truly self-made. They are all the products of forces larger than themselves.
If everything is determined, does that mean that the future is already written? Is there no room for change or progress?
Determinism does imply that the future is, in principle, predictable based on the current state of the universe and the laws of cause and effect. However, this doesn't mean that the future is static or that change is impossible. In fact, understanding the causal factors that shape human behavior can empower people to create positive change. By identifying the environmental and societal conditions that contribute to negative outcomes, people can work to modify those conditions and steer themselves towards a better future. Progress is possible, but it comes from understanding and harnessing the forces of determinism, not from some uncaused free will.
Many people find meaning and purpose in the idea that they are the authors of their own life story. If our choices are determined, doesn't that undermine the very idea of personal identity and agency?
The notion of the autonomous, freely choosing self is indeed central to many people's sense of identity and purpose. However, Sapolsky would argue that recognizing the determined nature of your thoughts and actions can actually enrich and deepen your sense of self. When people let go of the myth of the uncaused chooser, they can marvel at the incredible complexity and contingency of their own existence. People can appreciate how their unique identity is woven out of countless strands of influence, from their evolutionary history to their personal experiences. They are not diminished by determinism. On the contrary, they are revealed as part of something much larger and more intricate than they could have imagined. Their agency comes not from some mythical free will, but from their ability to understand and shape the causal webs that constitute them.
I'm curious to hear Sapolsky's thoughts on the practical implications of all this. If we could wave a magic wand and make everyone believe in determinism, what would change? How would the world be different?
That's a fascinating question. Sapolsky would suggest if everyone truly internalized the reality of determinism, the world would be a more compassionate, more humane, more focused on understanding and problem solving. People would spend less time and energy on blame, retribution, and moral grandstanding, and more on identifying and addressing the root causes of suffering and antisocial behavior. They would extend empathy and support to those struggling with mental illness, addiction, and trauma, recognizing that no one chooses to have those experiences. People would invest heavily in creating environments and institutions, from schools to workplaces to justice systems, that bring out the best in people and make antisocial behavior less likely. On an interpersonal level, people would be slower to judge and quicker to listen, seeking to understand the complex web of causes behind each person's actions. Society would still have boundaries and hold people accountable, but the focus would be on healing and growth rather than punishment for punishment's sake. Of course, fully embracing determinism is easier said than done. The belief in free will is deeply intuitive and woven into many of the cultural narratives and practices. But Sapolsky believes that moving in a more deterministic direction, step by step, can only lead to greater wisdom, greater compassion, and a greater capacity to create positive change in the world.
Thank you for this enlightening conversation. This has given us a lot to think about and challenged some of our deepest assumptions about who we are and how the world works.
Thank you for the discussion. It's been great exploring these ideas with you. To the listeners, I encourage you to approach these questions with a spirit of humility and compassion. Recognizing the limits of free will doesn't diminish your humanity. It expands it by connecting you to the vast web of causes and conditions that make you who you are. By embracing determinism, a door is open to a deeper understanding of yourselves and others, and to a world that is more just, more caring, and more invested in the well-being of all.
To our listeners, I hope this discussion has sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to explore these ideas further. I'd be happy to continue this discussion in the comments below. And if you're interested, you might like to read Robert Sapolsky's book, Determined: A Science of Life Without Free Will.